Tell your friends you're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
We have another very special episode. We have the 1981 movie Excalibur. Nathan, what is your history with Excalibur?
I had a VHS copy of this movie that I think I watched 500 times. From the time I was probably 10 years old until well into my teenage years and maybe even early adulthood. I like this movie. It always because you got to remember, the only Lord of the Rings and fantasy we had some cool movies that were worth watching. Conan the Barbarian, this Excalibur, and there was like a couple other movies. I mean, some people like Beastmaster. It was never really my thing, but this.
I've always read Sonya was definitely a cable watch all the time.
Oh yeah,
Um, like I saw this on cable a bunch because I don't like I didn't remember we have it on VHS, but I remember seeing this movie a lot. But for some reason, I only remember like the gory parts of this movie, and this movie's not really that gory until the very end of the movie. So.
yeah. It kind of hits the gas at the end. But yeah, this movie became a surrogate for a lot of things. So I watched it for different reasons.
Yeah.
Because I was really into like Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth, and all we had was like the animated Hobbit, and then the bizarre animated Lord of the Rings, which was kind of cool, but also very hard to find, not
Yeah.
generally available and seeable. So this sort of became the surrogate for like, imaginary worlds. And I was also reading a lot of, I was really into fantasy for a long time. My late teenage years, it was all sci-fi and that's all it stayed at. But for a while, this was the go-to. Like I'd read books and then watch this and like, oh, I imagine that becomes this. And so this was kind of like my Lord of the Rings, that and Conan the Barbarian
I guess
and
from
like
my perspective,
and some
it'd
of
be
those.
about seeing like the Sword of the Stone, and then just seeing this, and it's like, oh, this is the dark version of that story. So,
Yeah.
and that's not I don't even know where the story originates necessarily. So, is it legend or is there a book that starts all this, or a story or a poem or anything?
Well, Thomas Mallory wrote a book in the 15th century, I think, called La Mort d'Arthur, which that's French for the death of Arthur.
Okay.
And it was kind of written at the end of, oh, I don't know. I think it was the end of the Dark Ages, kind of like right
Yeah.
before the Enlightenment, but we were sort of getting out of the Dark Ages. But it was definitely set at like, because like Britain was not mentioned or anything. So there's been a lot of speculation that like the original story of King Arthur were just like the Roman legions that were abandoned with the
Yeah.
collapse of Rome, and they brought like the best things of Rome into Britain, which was just a land of pagans and psychopaths at that time. And
Well, yeah, wasn't that like the 2008 King Arthur movie? Was kind of that was its vibe.
yeah,
Okay.
it was like they were legion, like Rome, the center had collapsed.
Yeah.
These were fighting men, and it's like we're going to bring order to this wild land, and then that led into like the Dark Ages. Um, I think this was kind of a reinterpretation. I believe I have read that book once.
Okay.
It's like a series of books, but it's something that was translated from like medieval Latin to English to. So I know it wasn't like necessarily like the best. Uh,
But I'm guessing the original was as dark as this, and not
oh yeah,
not close to the Disney version
no,
of it.
the
So,
Disney one was fun and silly. No, this uh the Excalibur that John Borman imagined was definitely more probably closer.
but yeah, I did see some trivia that said that he was supposed to make a Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he kind of got to do this instead.
Yeah,
So that's what you're getting at.
yeah, he had because Tolkien had sold the rights to his production company, and he was like, "Please don't."
Damn, that'd be worth like $1 billion
Yeah.
nowadays.
Well, I think the reason was is like Tolkien's kids needed to go to college or
Oh,
something,
okay, yeah,
and he sold the rights in the early '70s to the whatever I think Borman's production company bought him under the caveat that it's like it cannot be an animated movie. I want it to be live action. That's what Tolkien wished, and then he died like 2 years later.
oh wow, okay.
So then it became like then Ralph Bashki got a hold of it and did his hallucinatory thing. Um, so yeah, but it was shopped around and it was just seen as like prohibitively expensive.
Yeah,
because John Borman was like, I'm all on board to try this, but everyone's like, no, this would be those are
And it's
that.
not like this movie's cheap in any way.
No, no, the Lord of the Rings is just like epic battle after
Yes, yeah,
epic
yeah, yeah.
battle, and even I mean, it strained credulity of our technology to make the Lord of the Rings movies, from the early 2000s. Like everyone was like, "This is amazing." And it's
Yeah,
like it was mostly computers pushed to the edge of what they could realistically do,
yeah.
and a very talented director who kind of sliced the story up in a way where it's like, "Oh yeah, this is cool." And we don't just have to stage epic battle after epic battle and spend $1 billion on one movie. It's we can divide this up a little bit. And he also had a great cast, and that helps.
Um, although this time around, I guess I had no idea, and maybe it was this version of the movie. But man, the audio is fucking terrible because it seems like they had to replace everything in this movie.
They did. There was a problem with the sound design and recording. They had to basically redo all the sound. There's weird spaces in the movie where there's no soundtrack and it's just swords clanking together
Yeah,
because they're running out of time. So they just put sword and sorcery sound effects in because it's like we can't lay the soundtrack over this again.
yeah,
Soundtrack for this movie is amazing. As presented in the movie was a little chopped up because they had all kinds of problems
yeah.
with the sound in this. Because there was a lot of. And this seems to be a John Borman thing where it's like we kind of got to do some weird ADR and like hurry up, let's go go go.
Well, I mean, that's sort of like the magic and the downside of like the spaghetti westerns is they're all done that way. Everything was done after. There's no onset audio. It was all done afterwards,
Yeah,
and so they made the dialogue sparser, or like people talking off screen,
yeah,
and but what they did instead is just get amazing visuals in its placement
yeah.
and do like amazing camera work and film in locations like, well, the audio here is going to suffer because of the location you're shooting at. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. We're replacing everything. So, or never recording it and just creating it afterwards. So I imagine there's something here because, like, a lot of these landscapes that, like, oh yeah, that's just 70-mile-an-hour wind all day there. Just on the side of a mountain with a Stonehenge next to a sea. Like, there's no way you're getting clean dialogue there. So,
Well, they filmed this mostly in Ireland,
okay, yeah,
and they literally could do a lot of things in one take because they'd show up, it'd rain for 5 hours, the sun would come out briefly. It's like, all right, everyone in position. And then it starts raining again. It's like perfect. It became like an Ed Wood thing. Like, okay, that's what God's to do today. So they had that problem. They had a bunch of like Shakespearean actors, Irish and English actors, who were ready and willing to deliver long scenes of dramatic dialogue. And yeah, like you said, with like a 70-mile-an-hour wind blowing behind. There's something about those dialogue scenes when they're delivered, from a stage where it's like, oh, we're going to record this in a studio and graft it over the guy speaking, where it doesn't quite have the same gravity to it.
yeah.
That's another problem.
But there's even some like on set scenes where it's like you can tell this is all ADR because like the camera moves into a shot and they have the guy talking, and then as soon as he's like face is in frame, it's like clear that he was never talking.
Yep.
So-
What did you say to him, Percival? And then they go in on Percival, and he's like, yes, and I told him this. It's like, oh, camera, and it's like, oh, all right. Yeah, but a lot of that, there was a lot of stuff too with they had a problem. Well, hell, they lost a bunch of the film when they initially were, because some of those opening fight scenes were filmed like in order, and the film was underexposed because something went wrong with the light meter, and they just like, oh, there's 2 weeks of filming just in the trash. And so it became there was a lot of problems like that.
This is like the opposite of Blade Runner. Like Blade Runner was like all these kind of like fun problems with nifty solutions for low budget. And
Yeah.
this was just like budget problems all the way through. Like, oh, what do we need to do? Just throw more money at it. Somebody fucked up. So.
Well, my favorite thing was John Borman did not like choreographed fight scenes.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't like the storyboard. That is boring. I want it to seem
Raw and real, yeah.
And it's like, Yeah, these guys are. I mean, they're wearing aluminum armor and swinging aluminum swords around. That still hurts
Yep.
and can kill you. So a lot of the actors are like jumping back. Yeah, that's how people act when you swing a morning star at their head. They're like, whoa. No one's like, it's not like in movies where they're like putting their arm up, and no, they're jumping back because they don't want to get hit in the head. So yeah, the armorer for this movie was contracted to build 35 suits of armor. He had to make over 100 design changes. Everyone hated the armor in this movie because it was wildly uncomfortable. You could wear it for 15 minutes and you're like, get this off of me. I'm going to have spinal problems.
Yeah.
We were chafing everywhere. They were doing a high polish pass on it because they wanted to show the dreariness of time, like, the early days of the court of King Arthur. All the armor was like, it would blind you in the sun.
Yeah.
By the end of the movie, the armor's dark and dirty and almost everyone's dead. And it's like, yeah, they had to age that through as the actors were being aged and stuff. And everyone hated wearing it because it was like, this is awful. I can't move. Because some of those guys, if you notice, even when they're fighting and moving, they're like, and you don't know, it's like, oh, is that how armor was back then? Well, it's actually in this time in the Dark Ages, they did not have plate armor. So that was a liberty the director took because he just thought plate armor looked cool.
Yeah.
Because in the Dark Ages, all they had was like chainmail over leather. That they did have armor plates, but they were either high to prevent the sword from getting at your neck, or they were like on your arm so you could block with it. But they didn't have full suits of armor on the body because you couldn't move very easily, and they didn't have the technology or metallurgy to mass manufacture that then. So,
But you got time. You ever seen chainmail be made?
oh yeah,
It's one piece. It's one ring at a time.
tink tink on a high horn, tink tink. And then what happens when it gets rusty? You heat up sand. You run it through sand really fast, and that grates, takes all the rust off of it.
Huh.
Burns the shit out of your hands too, because sand, you don't want it to melt. You just want it to get super hot because the reason you're getting it hot is to get the moisture out of it.
Yeah.
So you can put the chainmail and you take like a pawl, which looks like kind of like a spoon with a wooden round head, and you just push it through the sand. It's like very time consuming. It's like everything.
I accidentally made a dish yet the other day because I was gonna heat up lentils, but I didn't want to put them in the microwave, so I put them in the rice cooker.
Yeah.
And it actually started to foam up, and the foam started to go through the vent on the rice cooker. I was like, oops. And so I basically like overcooked them, and then they just kind of got mushy. And so I put salt and pepper on it, and it was like mashed potatoes made out of lentils. So I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. So now I have a better method. I just leave the hood open on the rice cooker, and I just hit start, and then I basically just get it down to where it starts to boil away the water, and just let enough get down to where it doesn't start burning, but there's not like it's overly liquid, and just kind of get down to a mash form, and so protein and carbs in bean form. So. But it tastes like mashed potatoes, sort of, or a mash, whatever. So it's, I don't know. I'd say it's better than like. You ever had cauliflower mash? I'd say it's better
yes.
than
I don't really like it too much.
Yeah, so this was a lot better than that. So, and just made by a pure accident. So yeah, this came out April 10th, 1981. But yeah, I'm guessing you saw this on VHS. So there was no theater experience for you for this, Nathan, right?
No, I would have been 6. So no,
this is definitely an R, right?
Yeah, this is definitely an R rated.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's nudity and violence and everything. So yeah. Of course, the director is John Borman. We're doing his movies. He's kind of back to form here with his weirdness, like the last. Yes. I mean, I guess actually, Exorcist 2 wasn't that weird compared to Exorcist.
Yeah.
So, and then like I know in between was Zardoz, but we watched Hell in the Pacific, and that had some weirdness to it, but wasn't the full on psychological like mess with your head that you usually get from John Borman. So.
Yeah.
Here there's a bit more of that, or at least it's played around with more because there's magic and everything. So it's like you can have all different kinds of perspectives and, like, are you seeing the real thing or what's going on? Is this a dream? Is this reality? What if it was both? Cinematographer is Alex Thompson, who does like a lot of action movies. So
Yes.
I guess that stays informed here. But this movie looks great. So
Yes.
especially when they're just shining the green lights into the shiny armor and the Excalibur, like that just looks awesome. And I don't
Well, not
feel,
only were they shining green lights, they were using green and blue filters on the lenses.
yeah,
And one of the reasons he did that, Alex Thompson did that, was because they were shooting on a lower grade of film to save money.
okay,
So it created kind of this gauzy, magical look. Because really, a lot of things were just out of focus with the films and lenses they were doing. So
yeah,
he's like, let's make it look mystical. That's why I have this weird kind of light set up here because this one's green, that one's blue.
yeah.
And I know I'm not in a forest, so it probably having that effect. And I didn't have a suit of armor to wear, but yeah. So in honor of in honor of Alex Thompson,
Yeah, I turned mine green just because I really like all the green and the shiny armor. So because I don't think I've seen something like that before or since. But
no, that
um,
was very. He got an Oscar nomination for it. So
cool. Well, I mean, I guess there's actually a lot of horror. It's actually kind of a horror movie lighting, just in a fantasy setting, and with shiny armor. It just makes a whole different vibe. So
we got to remember after this he did Legend and Labyrinth,
okay, yeah,
then Alien 3 later on,
all right, yeah.
and also did Demolition Man. So yeah, he's done like a lot. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff he's done, but yeah,
Okay, so
he's
yeah, we've seen him before. Yeah, we did Demolition Man. Okay, yeah.
yeah. So this guy has, but this is when he kind of came to. He was definitely recognized as like, oh, this guy's a talent. I mean, he'd been doing things for he had a 10-year career before this, but this one everyone always thinks like this movie looks beautiful,
Yeah.
and it's like it was crappy film stock. We put red and green gel filters over the lenses. We shined a lot of lights around, and because we did a lot of red background lighting, which contrasted with the green and red film filters, and it's like, oh yeah, they had fun with it. It's just like, oh, that's why this movie looks cool, because the movie is like it's like a dream
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
fantasy. So it's like this works.
Well, even you were talking about like in Exorcist 2, like it had kind of a Gaussian look to it. But and that guy won an Oscar, not for that movie, but he was an Oscar winner. And like this one's even better at doing that kind of vibe. So with apparently less money.
Yeah.
or you said just less quality stock and just clever filmmaking.
Well, they had an $11 million budget in the 1979 80 when they
Which
were
would probably go a long way in 80s Ireland.
yeah. Well, you got to remember when they say there's like a budget. Yeah, it's also like you're getting a huge subsidies from like the Irish government, the British government, because
Yeah.
that's how the films are made over there. So it's they probably say with this would take you $20 million to do in America with no subsidies. So
Yeah.
and also you're getting these crazy like Shakespearean actors and like the best grade of actors you can buy for the English language, and they're just like hanging around like, yeah, come on over, do a movie. It's uh, and a lot of famous people were in this movie.
Um, this was written by. Oh wait, was this the guy that co-directed or in Internet Movie Database, Rospo Pallenberg? Is he like listed as a co-director on The Exorcist too?
um Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, he's listed as an uncredited director. So this is the guy who shot like the last third of Exorcist 2.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because John Borman had dengue fever or something. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So yeah, him and that guy wrote the script. They didn't write it together because it's and the words. So that means they wrote it separately, not together. But they've worked before, I guess. But he writes his next movie, Emerald Forest. So
Yes.
so he worked with this guy. But that's kind of like all his known credits is him paired with John Borman. He kind of really doesn't have a whole lot without John Borman. So, and then the cast is Nigel Terry, who's like, should I know him, Nathan, or do you know him from other things?
No, I think this was like his probably if you're as an American, this would be the biggest thing you knew him for.
Okay.
He has done other things, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know any of them. He did a great job in this. He's unfortunately died. A lot of the people in this movie have died.
Okay.
Because he died at, he was 69,
Okay.
which that's kind of young, but
Helen Mirren.
yes,
Just the great Helen Mirren.
great Helen Mirren, very
Which I feel,
younger at Helen Mirren.
yeah, but I don't know, like, I mean, she was like known in the '70s, so but still, like, yeah, it feels like she didn't really get known until she was really like later, like older in her career. So, because you see her like in like movies back there, is like, is she slumming it here, or is this like the best she can do, or is she like, is she like, is she wanted by Hollywood, or because for me, it just feel like Helen Mirren appeared out of nowhere, and then suddenly you look at her filmography, and it's like, oh, she's in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember her in that.
Yeah, I see Helen Mirren as a very accomplished English actress who came to Hollywood as an elder statesman type. She always played like a powerful woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, most people would probably know her from, well, not the Elemental and Chronicles of Riddick, but I know her from that. Probably as M in the 007 movies.
Yeah.
And she did a lot of things, but yeah, she's
I mean, she was like, yeah, wasn't she in Caligula? Yeah,
Yes.
she was. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Sexy Caligula.
Yeah, well, yeah, she was like a model at some point, but then she's also like a great actor, so it's like, just kind of had a weird career.
Yep, she does a very good Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She does a good job of like, oh yeah, that's Queen Elizabeth. Like she really like talks like her, look like her, but she talks like her.
And she has a fun role in the Fast and Furious movies.
Oh, okay.
She is like the mother of the Shaw brothers, so
Interesting. All right.
which that's the Jason Statham's character is a Shaw.
Yeah.
And then like his brother was killed in a previous movie, so he's out for revenge, but then he becomes a part of the team later on. So and then he pairs up with The Rock in the Hobbs and Shaw movie. So but now The Rock is back for the last Fast and Furious movie, so and Nicholas Clay is the other listed as the top cast, who I don't really know him either, but
he died fairly young. He died in 2000 at the age of 53.
yeah.
He mainly
He plays a good Lancelot. I mean, like, he's a good actor, and they have him be naked a lot, so you got to be confident with that. So
he got known as with the Zulu Dawn, which was about the English Bush Wars and where they're fighting the Zulus.
okay,
It was Burt Lancaster, Peter O'Toole. He was a young guy in that.
I just remember the movie Zulu with what's his name?
Oh,
Michael Caine. Yeah,
yeah, that's when you learn about like firing in rank or whatever. It's like that's nuts. It's like never break rank. It's just fire, it's drop down, reload, next group fire, and it's like, and there's just people running at you with swords. It's like, wow.
Well, yeah, that's on the list for us to do because I remember that being like a great movie when I was a kid, and maybe it has like a lot of racist connotations now, but I was just like, to me that was like before I ever saw a zombie movie, like that's a zombie movie.
Yeah.
But also in that movie, it's like, it's not like the white guys are right, like they're invading someone else's land, and it's not like the Zulus are necessarily primitive people. They have a strategy. It's like you send a scout group in, you find out the weaknesses, you come back with more people. It's like their strategy is sound because they're outgunned, literally, and they out-strategize, these supposed superior white people.
Yeah, they're doing like probing attacks and everything. They understand what they're doing. Yeah, me and Grayson watched that quite recently. It holds up pretty well. I mean, it's just it's a time and place in history that would be like, that's weird, but it's like, it's like, kind of vaguely inspiring and cool. It's like, well, everyone was there for the wrong reason, obviously, but they died with their friends, so I could say something about that, because that's like the worst thing in life is to die alone. So according to a lot of theories, so it's like, well, I guess.
All right, good. You've watched that recently. Okay, well, that'll come up at some point.
Oh yeah, I own
probably
that
this year. So
yeah.
Um, we have a giant list of movies. So
Oh yeah, we got lots of stuff.
if you want to suggest stuff, we can do it. But
Yeah, please. We've done viewer suggestions.
once.
And by my viewer, I mean my wife. So.
Let's see. Oh yeah, well, I guess we'll just get into it. That's all my notes I have.
Oh, there's a few. I want to linger on the cast a little bit because they'll come and go. But it's interesting when you watch this, like who's someone we would know. Patrick Stewart was in
Yeah.
this.
Who I did not recognize the first time he's in this movie because he's
It's
just
his voice.
screaming and bloody.
Yeah, it's his voice. It's like that's Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
He's still bald. That never changes.
I think actually
Liam,
it was the facial hair that threw me off.
oh yeah, that's right.
He's got
Yeah,
kind
he
of
was
patchy facial hairs.
he was like a local lord, Leandergrance,
Yeah.
which is like some of the names in this was that beautiful mixture of French and English. Where I wish we had cool names like that now. Liam Neeson.
Yes,
Was
this is his slumming it period. Because remember, he's also in Kroll.
Yes.
Isn't he like the Cyclops in Kroll or something like that?
Something I've seen Kroll twice in my life.
All
Why?
I know is like Kroll has that cool boomerang,
Yes.
and I can't remember if the boomerang is called Kroll or if like the bad guy's named Kroll.
I think the bad guy was Kroll.
But it's also like a fantasy movie, but there's also spaceships and shit. So like I've
Yeah.
never really actually sat down and watched Kroll. So.
So we have Liam Neeson as Gawain, one of the knights. He was like Arthur's brother or nephew. I'm not sure. In this movie, I think it was his nephew.
Okay,
Gabriel.
he is not the Cyclops in Kroll.
Okay, I didn't think he was.
Well, he's a big, tall guy, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I see here he is, which he weirdly kind of looks. Shit, who's that guy? Who's that guy that's in everything now that had like the he got killed by the mountain in
Oh, yes. He's
the Last of Us guy.
he's like he's from South America. What's his name?
Last of Us TV series. Let's see
It's
if
gonna come up. So yeah, he's the everything guy now.
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, Pedro Pascal.
He
Yep.
kind of looks like Pedro Pascal in Kroll. So,
Okay.
but yeah, this is it took a while for Liam Neeson to like really hit it big. Like I think it was probably Schindler's List that put him on like the A list.
I think so. Yeah, because before that it was Darkman.
yeah. See, yeah, he's slumming it.
Well, they kind of praised his performance. He elevated.
Darkman's a great movie. That's also just but it's also a ridiculous, movie.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's low budget, like weird. Because that's is that a Sam Raimi?
Yep, that's Sam Raimi.
Yep.
That's him wanting to do, I believe. Oh, what did he want? Did he want? I can't remember if he wanted to do Batman. He wanted to do like He wanted to do a comic book movie. Couldn't get the rights to it. Decided, screw it. I'll just do my own version of it.
I'll make my own Batman,
Yeah.
Darkman. Like go that many syllables off. And we got Gabriel Byrne, I think in one of his early roles.
Yep.
Another Irish actor. He was King Arthur's father. King Uther Pendragon. Cool names you don't hear anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. I think Syrian Hines was in a cut scene. I don't think he was in the movie. But he's another Irish actor. Syrian Hines is the Irish actor that always plays like Russian oligarchs and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's like that guy's Irish. He's like, oh, he looks Russian. He's like, yeah, Irish people kind of look like everybody. They can play pretty much any characters.
Yeah. I don't know if Sherry Lungi was in anything, but she's good in this movie. Oh,
Which one was she?
She was Guinevere.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And like, oh wait, do I know? What about the guy who played Merlin? Is he in a bunch of stuff?
He was like, he's like he was credited as Nicole Williamson here. He's like a Scottish actor.
Okay. I mean, I see. Look at his credits. He does a lot of Shakespeare stuff, so he just must be a Shakespearean actor. So that.
Oh yeah, because he was like he stole the movie a lot. Every scene he was in, he stole the movie. I was like, this guy's crazy. I guess him and Helen Mirren
Oh,
absolutely.
he's in The Exorcist 3. I think he's like the main character, Father Morning.
I think so. You're right. Yeah.
Ah,
I guess him and Helen Mirren hated each other.
that makes sense.
Didn't want to be in
Just
the
being in
same movie.
character.
No, they hated each other before the movie.
Okay.
One said they didn't want to work with the other, I forget, but John Borman was like, "Oh, just okay. Well, if you both want to, you can hit me, but I need you in the movie. Just hit me if you get mad at the other person." But by the end of it, they were friends again.
Okay.
And this is also when Liam Neeson started his relationship with Helen Mirren.
Okay.
Because Neeson and Helen Mirren were a thing for like 15 years or something.
Okay.
So yeah, that's all the actors. The guy who played the Hound, was he in this too? Be a really young guy in this, but
Oh, I don't know.
I don't see his name. Maybe that was something
The
he might have been an
the guy who
extra.
played Hector looks kind of familiar, but I'm looking at his credits now. But it just seems to be like he's a British guy, so you probably saw him in just British television shows. Because every British actor is in every British television show. If you just
Yeah, oh yeah.
if you just wait long enough, they'll show up there. So
Yeah, there's not like a billion people there.
yeah, it's like Law and Order. Just wait, and you'll see every actor in Law and Order.
Yeah, so that guy's name is Rory McCann. Nah, he wouldn't have been in this. He's not a whole lot older than me, so I would have been like 10 years old when this came out.
Okay.
No, he was not in this at all. For some reason, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe it was somebody else. He should have been in this, though. You know, he would have fit it. It was...
Well, I mean, who played who played Arthur's like stepbrother or adopted brother?
Oh, I forget.
The character's name is Kay, I think.
Oh, Niall O'Brien?
Oh, he doesn't even have a picture, so he probably wasn't even in other stuff. But apparently, he was in Gorky Park. I don't even know what that is. Apparently, he was in Braveheart. Okay.
Oh, he's like he's in that like kind of that British like a lot of TV and then stage and then some movies. Yeah, he was in a lot of like okay.
Yeah, I bet you could make a living being a stage actor in the UK.
He's Irish, so.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Well, still.
Yeah, I mean it's close enough.
Because like if you try being a theater actor in the United States, it's like, well, then you're just living in New York because that's the only way you could do it. Whereas like,
Yeah, you're living in New York making $20,000.
because like you could travel around to different theaters in the UK, like they just have that built there. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, use public transportation. It's like here, it's like, I got to fly out to LA to do this theater thing. there went my entire paycheck. So, so we got Act 1. We got titles. The Dark Ages, the land was divided and without a king. Out of those lost century rose a legend of the sorcerer Merlin, of the coming of a king, of the sword of power. Excalibur, bright metal and shiny. I can't. No, that wasn't a title. I just wrote that. We see the Excalibur sword. So, hey, it's what the movie's called, which is a cool name. So,
Yeah, it is a cool name.
It's got X and Caliber in it.
Yeah, the other star of this movie too is also the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Made by Trevor Jones. He's a South African guy who's composed a lot of soundtracks for movies. You know, like there's a bunch of them, but the Time Bandits, The Dark Crystal was a famous one, which was basically, I was told, like this soundtrack but more realized.
Okay.
He borrowed a lot less from Wagner and Orloff to do things. He also, I think his most successful one was Last of the Mohicans.
Oh yeah.
He worked with
I've never seen that movie. I hear
Randy
it's good.
Edelman on that one. Yeah, it's got the soundtrack.
Okay.
It's pretty famous. I also did Dark.
There's like 3 movies of that exact era that I've never seen, but for some reason I know them. There's Last of the Mohicans. There's Rob Roy, and there's like a river runs through it. I know they're not even related. I just know they're around the air.
Yeah, a lot of the because Trevor Jones like did his own recordings, but like that opening scene and the end music, that's from Wagner's Ring Cycle.
Yeah, the O Fortuna or whatever.
No, that's the stuff. What's
Oh,
the
the
one?
very end. I was thinking of when they like start the ride to the battle and they have
No,
that.
that's horror stuff. That's got an interesting story to it too. But
Okay.
the
Which is
the
used in a bunch of TV commercials. I'm not sure
yeah,
if this is the first like. Well, this won't be the first use of it, but maybe a famous use of it. So
probably famous. I think everyone who made those commercials later like watched this movie at one.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the scene that opens and closes this, that dun dun, and dun dun, that's from the fourth cycle of the Ring Cycle, or what do they call that? The Götterdämmerung or something in
Yeah.
German. And so yeah, that's like called the that's the oh, what's that? The Siegfried's Funeral or whatever. But they kind of mixed their own stuff in with it. So he borrowed from this to give it like a kind of a place and a time. But yeah, I think this was the first like it was like the first like British production to use like German opera
Yeah.
as a backdrop, and it's like because Wagner is kind of a controversial guy,
Yeah.
mainly because Hitler really liked him.
Yep.
A lot of the Hitler mythology, because Hitler really liked the Mort to Arthur too. He loved this story. And so, because Hitler saw himself as Percival, he never saw himself as King Arthur. He was Percival. He was going to bring the chalice of truth to the people, and and all whatever twisted logic he had. But I know a lot of like Nazis found Wagner to be very, very tedious, and they're like, "Oh, well, Adolf wants to take us to the opera again, so we got to watch the Wagner's Ring Cycle." But Wagner's Ring Cycle is also used as a basis for my favorite sci-fi series, the Gap Cycle.
Yeah.
That's all based on the
Wagner's Ring Cycle. So.
and I've actually I have all the music. I don't speak German and I don't understand opera, so some of it's kind of lost. But a lot it's more of like a Viking story.
Yeah.
If that's what
it's mythology being,
yeah,
it's all that stuff.
but we'll talk
Iliad
about
and Odyssey, things like that. So.
or Fortuna. We'll talk about that later because that's actually based on something really cool when you have the lyrics translated from medieval Latin to English. Oh, that's a cool song. They're just screaming it in medieval Latin, so you don't understand it. But yeah, we'll get to that in a bit.
Also, Excalibur is the second movie in a row that starts with EX. So
yeah,
for John.
Okay.
I found that out when I was erasing the name and found out, I don't have to get rid of the first two letters. So.
That's interesting. I would have never put that together.
It saved me 2 delete strokes, Nathan. So, so we cut to it's night. We see horses expelling breath in the cold, and they clearly just have like lights lit up behind this hill, but it looks neat. So, and it looks cold. So it looks like nobody's having a good time.
No.
The knights are prepared with fire. We see a guy with a staff. It's Merlin, played by Nicole Williamson. He walks over a hill. A battle ensues. There's violence all around. Lots of screaming. Here we have a triumph.
Yeah, there's lots of fire on the hills.
There's a triumphant score going on. Merlin calls for Uther Pendragon, played by Gabriel Byrne, who goes around killing people and asking Merlin for a great sword. He says, I need the sword to be king. And then we cut to Merlin stands before a lake, and a lady's hand emerges from the lake holding the sword. So this is the titular lady in the lake. Well, not titular, but, we know her as the lady in the lake. Which, I don't know, what does that lady do there? She just put swords together? Is this what do they call it? What do they call it in the Holy Grail? Like a sword distributing tart?
Oh, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system.
I
think in like in that era though, I don't know if it's a like Celtic mythology or whatever. Yeah, like the Gaia, the mother, the earth spirit, like that's who would be like the land is wounded and she'll
Yeah.
make a sword, and Merlin is like her force on earth, and the
Yeah.
sword will align people and
Yeah.
stop the chaos and heal the burnt land, because it's just guys running around lighting fires and running each other with spears. That's not good. You're not
but
bringing in the harvests on a regular basis when you're doing that. So
but also this movie's like about like Christianity taking over and like the pagan rituals being left behind, and so like all these are like the last of the pagan powers being bestowed upon men.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Merlin says, yeah, the one god comes to drive out the many and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I remember that. It's a cool line.
um, Merlin and Uther show off Excalibur to the knights, and Uther offers land and the to the Duke here, and the two factions join forces under him being king. And we cut to they hang out at a bar where there's a lady is dancing, which it's like the Duke's wife. The guys pound the table in unison. It's very weird. It's
Very sexual.
yeah. Uther says he must have her, but like risks the alliance. Cut to there's an attack on the castle as their alliance has ended because Uther wants to lust for his wife. um,
Yes, the guy's actual name, he was the Duke of Cornwall,
okay.
but his name was Glorious Tintangal. Well, they just called him the Duke.
Okay, yeah, that's all I know him as, the Duke. So
Yeah.
which would imply there is a king in this land already.
It seems like they've broken down into like regional powers, like
Okay.
regional warlords.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's because the throne is contested. That's why. Well, there wasn't a king, and then it was Uther, and then of course we'll find out what happened to that, and then we have to determine who the king is by pulling a sword out of a rock. But that's
this is like 20 years of like a land awaiting a king to appear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's contention between Uther and Merlin to use magic and win the battle. Uther swears to Merlin. Then Uther calls a retreat, and then we cut to Merlin and Uther go to some Stonehenge thing while Uther's men go off to the camp or whatever. Merlin starts casting a spell or whatever. Yeah, it's a lot of whatevers. There's no really, there's no hard science here. It's all magic. Uther falls asleep against a rock, which again, this is like a Stonehenge thing. So again, that's just like more pagan stuff or whatever you want. This is where the UFOs land. Whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Uther screams awake at night. He says, "I dreamt of a dragon," and then Merlin's like, "I have awoken him," which is like, I don't know if it's like they just didn't have the money and the budget for it, but like they always talk about the dragon, but it's always like in a metaphorical sense, like the land is a dragon, everything's a part of the dragon, like the scales, the claws, they all like represent different things, but there is no like literal dragon in this movie. So
Yeah, I think it was always a metaphor in the customs and traditions of that time.
okay.
I know they try to make it seem like, in art there were actually people who went out and fought dragons that lived in England. And it's like, I don't think there's fossil evidence of that. It was just a metaphor. It was like a mythical beast.
Well, and his last name's Pendragon, so it's right there. So
yeah,
it's a pen and a dragon. You write the story. The Duke goes out after Uther's men, and then Merlin casts a spell to make people think he's the Duke, and his lust allows him to ride the fog to the castle. So, I think that's what Merlin says, or something like that.
Yeah, your lust will carry you.
Yes. The Duke goes out looking for Uther, and his horse knocks him off onto spikes. His kid wakes up saying her father is dead, which this is Morgana, which I didn't realize that until later. So, when they just spell it out. So,
Yeah.
Uther has the Duke. Oh, Uther as the Duke comes for Igraine, which was the Duke's wife. He has sex with her in front of a fire, and we cut between like the Duke dying in front of a fire as he's impaled on spikes. So, that's a different kind of penetration. So.
Yeah. And by the way, Igraine was played by John Borman's daughter.
Okay, that's weird.
Oh yeah. This two of John Borman's children are in this movie.
Oh, okay.
and they're connected. It's weird. Yeah.
Who's his other child play?
Young Mordred is John
Oh,
Borman's
okay.
child.
All right.
What's his name? Yeah. So his sister is deceived and impregnated by Uther, and then his his son is Mordred, who is like that lady's daughter, which is Morgana, is like that's her evil child from her coupling with King Arthur, who is her half brother.
Yeah.
So this what's
This
the
movie
guy?
goes places.
Oh yeah, because
Yeah,
what's his?
what
Yeah,
and one of the Mordreds is played by the banjo kid from Deliverance.
uh yes. But the young Mordred, Charlie Borman plays the young Mordred.
Okay, all right.
So that lady's sister or brother is like the young brother is or younger brother. It's like, oh, that's weird because some people call this the Borman family film. It's like a joke.
You watch it every Christmas.
Yes.
Here's your daughter's sex scene.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's a rape scene. So, we cut to the castle brings the Duke's body back, which Igraine is confused by, having like, well, I was with him last night. What's going on here? Then Uther shows up at the castle. Is this supposed to be like a lot of time in between? Because Igraine suddenly has a child, and I'm pretty sure 9 months didn't go by. So.
It is a while. That's one of the big problems with this movie is they transition through time, but they don't make it clear that they've even done it,
Yeah.
let alone how much time has passed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and then later on in the movie, they just have magic bring about instant gestation and stuff like that. So, so yeah, she suddenly has a kid. Uther looks at the kid and he says like, "All I've known is to butcher men. Now I shall love them," or something like that. Because it's like, well, I have a kid now. I love him. Which I forget, like that Uther wasn't Arthur. I thought like, oh, is this like a weird spelling? It's like, oh wait, no, this is Arthur's dad. So okay.
Yeah, because remember Merlin told Uther, it's like what comes from your lust shall be mine.
Yeah.
He's all just pure thinking with his penis, like, yes,
Yeah.
fine, whatever you want. And then it's Merlin comes to collect on the debt, and it's like, oh.
So yeah, Merlin shows up, wants a child as payment. Igraine picks up on Uther was the guy posing as the Duke, so she's mad about that. And then, but then Uther steals the kid away and hands it to Merlin. Merlin just spells out how bad Uther is. It's like, yeah, you got your men killed to take over a castle to have sex with a lady. It's like no one's gonna trust you ever again. So
Yeah.
you're not fit to be a good king. Merlin leaves with the baby. We cut to Uther's chasing after Merlin. He gets ambushed. Uther grabs Excalibur and like hacks off a limb, which I think this is like there's only like 2 moments where like Excalibur's like invincible, and this is one, and then like when he chops through the spears, the other one. But it's not the lightsaber you kind of expect out of the Excalibur sword, but but also like other people have it like all the time. So here's where you get like how clumsy the armor is, because Uther like clumsily tries to escape the situation in armor and in the mud, and you just see him trudging away and people trudging after it. So it's like, oh yeah, this would suck.
Yeah.
That's why people ride horses with this stuff on. So
Yeah, and they're riding horses around in that mud. So you can imagine that mud is like, let's throw shit into the mix to make it funner and smell even better.
Uther cries for Merlin, Merlin hears it, and then just kind of like looks away. Like, well, they don't see each other; he just hears him. And then Uther shoves Excalibur in a stone, swearing no one shall use Excalibur but him. And people can't pull the sword from the stone. Merlin calls the baby Arthur, and that's the end of Act 1. Uther just dies bleeding on like a log or something like that. So.
Yeah, and Merlin does something where he's like, he who pulls the sword from the stone shall be king, and like it's a proclamation he makes. Yeah. Somehow everyone hears it even though he's far away, which is okay. That's like Merlin using magic voice.
And I can't remember how this works in the Disney Sword in the Stone. Is there always just the sword in the stone, or does it like get taken out of the lake and put in the stone by Uther in that. I can't remember. Or is it just the stone, or the sword just always exists in the stone?
I don't think they cover the whole intro part of
Okay.
Arthur as a young child. I don't think they like oh, he's like he's a product of deceptive sex. Merlin cast an illusion. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't think they're going to put that in a Disney film.
Yeah, but like they've toned that down. But I don't even think a toned down version of that exists. I can't. I just
No,
haven't seen that movie in a while. That movie was probably made in the '50s or something like that.
it's very fun and lighthearted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like this. This is more like
Well, sometimes because like Disney movies are in color because they're animated, you forget like how old some of them are. Because then like wasn't like Snow White like wasn't that like made in like 1938 or something like that?
they just talk about like yeah they hand painted all the panels. Like what? They have an army of people to do that. It's like no, it just took a real long time.
Yeah, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking Bambi was like a later Disney movie, but that was probably like the 40s or something. 1942.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's quite
They
a
must
movie.
have done a re-release because I've for some reason I remember seeing that in theaters. I can't.
Yeah. Oh
remember.
yeah. They've done that.
But like as
Next,
a
there's
kid,
a live action version of it.
well, I know like they had some advanced stuff in that because that's where they had like the fancy plate system where they had like a multi-plane of different plates and they can kind of create like a oh what do they call that crap? It's like a plane of distance that usually you couldn't do.
Oh, like you create artificial depth.
Yes,
Okay,
because
depth.
it's like you have one cell because it's like the camera's like on a tower and there's like multiple planes and you can adjust like how they like to the camera and so you can pull them apart or put them together and so you can create this kind of like depth of field background movement with all these different plates. It's like an amazing thing. It was so that's probably why I think Bambi's a bit more modern than some of the older Disney movies. Let's see here. So in Act 2, there's a camp of like there's a camp like of like a knights tournament built near Excalibur. So there's like this tournament to like who can
Everyone's jousting to see who will draw the sword.
yeah, because they think if they prove their worth in the ring, the knight's ring, then that will like allow them to pull the sword. Because like in the Disney movie, it was just people are lining up and trying to pull the sword, but here it's like a tournament before you pull the sword.
Yeah, test of bravery.
Yeah, because there's all ceremony around it. Because even before like a guy pulls a sword, there's like some kind of monk there with some like leaves and stuff that will bestow, like some weird chants and stuff like that. There's some arena fighting in front of a crowd. Then there's a ceremony to pull the sword. He who pulls the sword shall be king. Here we get Leon de Grance. This is Patrick Stewart, which I didn't recognize at first. He tries to pull the sword, but he can't. Even like wipes some blood on himself to like, yeah, the blood shall give me the power, and then nothing. We see Arthur, played by Nigel Terry. He's a squire for another knight, like Kay. I think it's his brother, his adopted brother. He has to go grab a sword. And when he gets to the tent, like he sees like some kid has like stolen the sword and ran off with it. Where there's a moment where like Arthur like runs through like a blacksmith's tent and kind of looks at a sword and thinks he should steal it, and then like thinks better of himself.
Well, the
And
blacksmith looks at him, and they do
Yeah.
this cool camera thing where he looks at the blacksmith looks at him, and he just moves on.
Arthur gives chase to the kids, run off with a sword. Arthur ends up in front of the Excalibur, but like without an audience, and he just casually pulls the sword out and then offers it to Kay, which is funny. He's like, "Here's a sword, dude." And then Sir Hector, which is like his adopted father, he has him put the sword back. Well, actually, he's like, "Kay, did you pull the sword?" And he's like, "Yes, father." But then Kay does the right thing. He says, "No, I didn't. It was Arthur." But Sir Hector has Arthur put the sword back. And then other knights show up and try to like steal Arthur's thunder, see if they can pull the sword, but they can't. And now Arthur pulls the sword like in front of an audience, and his dad declares him the king. Here is where Hector explains his lineage, that he's not his real father. And then just Merlin shows up in the background, and then Merlin introduces himself. And it's like, here's where we get Leon de Grant says, "If a boy has been chosen, then a boy shall be king." So he has his first like kind of benefactor here, or support from one of the knights or dukes or whatever. Because the Leondegrance, he's like he has a castle, so he's like a king or something, or he's another duke. I'm not sure or whatever. So
He's called a king, but he's more like a regional warlord.
okay,
Um, but yeah, he pledges his allegiance to Arthur. Now Urian's another one. He's another one of those one of these dukes or whatever. He's like, oh, Merlin's trying to foist a fatherless boy on us. He wants a bastard king,
Yeah.
and then that's when I think Merlin explains to Arthur who his parents actually are. He's like,
Yeah.
no, you're the son of Uther and Egwene.
So yeah, there's division amongst the people. Arthur runs away. Merlin catches him like in the middle of the forest and tries to convince him that he'll be king, which Arthur doesn't really want to do that because he's like, well, what do I know about being a king? Which is like sort of the whole point of this is like the person who wouldn't want the power is the best person to have the power. So, um, then it suddenly become night. There's a lot of weird stuff where like Merlin's sleeping on this log, and then he has like weird like brown eyes or something like that. So.
He's sleeping with one eye open, essential. What I got out of it.
Merlin talks about the power of the dragon being in everything. We cut to the next day. Arthur's playing around with Excalibur, and he's like, "The sword's a part of the dragon too, right, Merlin?" He's like, "You got it, kid."
Yeah. Very Luke and Ben Kenobi.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Yeah.
Arthur wants to know about his biological father. Merlin speaks, which I think here he says it's Uther Pendragon. And maybe says Igraine. I can't remember.
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
It's like, you're the son of Uther and Egwene, but he's what's Nicole Williamson is doing like full like Shakespearean acting all the way through this because every line is delivered like this. It's just because he's like that's how he knows how to act, and of course this is like it's appropriate to act that way in this production because that's how it was always presented.
Merlin speaks of a castle siege going against Leondegrance.
Yeah.
Arthur goes back to get to Hector and Kay, and so they go to Leondegrance castle to help him out, which is kind of implied it's been longer than a night here, like it's been 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a while. Again, that's the thing in this movie. Time passes in a weird, magical way, which is sort of cool because it's like, none of this really happened. Like writing down dates, like, oh, on this day, King Arthur did this. Like,
it's already a long movie, and they do a lot of time skips anyway, so like they got to do it.
Well, the original cut of this movie was 3.5 hours.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
And then they're like, well, we got to get this down to 220.
Yeah.
So there's probably like the director's cut of this movie. A lot of this stuff would probably be a lot more like seamless. Like, oh yeah, 20 years have passed. Of course. Like, nope, cut that.
So yeah, we go to the castle siege. Merlin and Arthur pull down a siege tower. There's a horse fight in the moat, which this looks pretty cool. Arthur works his way up another siege tower. It's just like a series of ladders. And he's trying to help out Leondegrance. Guinevere watches on. She's holding the shield, like she's doing some shield maiden stuff. I'm guessing. So,
yeah,
I mean that's Viking stuff, but that's what she's fighting back.
Herself from getting killed. Yeah,
yes.
holds us. Some huge man is it an axe?
Yeah,
it's like trying to hit a woman with an axe. Okay, that's weird.
So she's kind of in awe in Arthur as he like fights his way up. He stabs a guy in the back that's fighting Leondegrance, and then he like leaps from the castle to tackle Urians off a horse, and then he holds Urians at sword point, and Urian says he won't swear fealty to a squire, and so then Arthur turns it around and gives Urian's Excalibur and asks him to knight him, which is this pause in the battle. Is like they're waiting, like, is he gonna knight this guy or is he gonna like do an execution and like claim power of Excalibur? And then Urian swears fealty to Arthur. It's just a great scene, like great like turnaround.
Yeah, because he knights. Because what does he say in the name of Saint George and Saint Michael? Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like even Merlin is because Merlin's like is not thrown by anything because he can see into the future, and like he
Yeah.
sees this and it's like I've never seen this before. So
See this? It's yeah. It's always delivered like that.
and it's sort of like the great magic of the naivety of Arthur.
Yeah.
It's like what makes his character great. It's like in
He's
the
an innocent.
yeah, well even in the form of like great when he has great what do you call that? When he's betrayed, it's like he's perfectly it's perfectly acceptable for him to seek revenge.
Yeah.
And then you even see him like have revenge on the tip of his tongue, and then he fights that back. And so yeah, it just makes him a great character. So then we cut to Arthur's being healed by Guinevere, which is kind of like a standard scene in a movie to make people fall in love. So when they when like the lady's healing the guy, and he looks over his like, his war wounds, which I guess that's implied that war wounds are sexy then. So.
All have scars.
Then we cut to there's a party at the castle. Arthur has fallen for Guinevere. Arthur asks if Merlin if he can make her love him, and Merlin's like, never again. That's a bad idea. So. But she keeps paying it. I mean, she's like, I guess he's thrown off because she's like dancing with everybody in the crowd, but then she like breaks away to like go say hi to Arthur. So it's like, well, clearly, like, she likes Arthur, but he just doesn't know what to do with that because he's a naive kid. So he's a naive 40-year-old man that is supposed to be 14 years old. So. Or however old the guy was here. So, Merlin mentions he will marry Guinevere but be betrayed by his best friend, which, Arthur has selective hearing on that, so he never hears the betrayed part. So. Guinevere gives Arthur a cookie saying it's like, was it like rose petal? What was it? Unbirthed oats or something?
Oh, what does she say? It's like it'll make you sleepy, so be careful, but I forget what it is. Yeah.
And then a secret, some secrets. I don't. The secret is love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she goes back to dancing, and then like there's something about There's also a metaphor here where it's like, if once Arthur eats the cookie or takes a bite of the cookies, like it's like, well, now you're bound to your future of betrayal. So it's like, okay.
It's so dark, but it's also they're kind of like, such is life. It's like, no, wait a minute, this is gonna break everything.
We cut to
that's the thing about Merlin, he has imperfect vision.
Yeah.
Because he would never, there's a lot of things that shouldn't have happened.
Arthur and his knights are being bested by a single knight on a bridge. So here we have Arthur meets Lancelot, which he says he's from the sea. So is he supposed to be like, this is supposed to be England? So is this guy supposed to be Irish or something? Or
it's French.
French. Okay, that makes sense.
French. But yeah. Well, I mean, actually, yeah.
So now they've challenged each other to a duel, which is like a lot of like naysaying here, where it's like a king isn't supposed to fight for himself; he's supposed to have a champion. But like, Arthur's here is like, well, if this guy's so good, like I'm gonna make him my champion. So they have a joust. They like kind of evilly joust each other on the first run, but then Arthur gets knocked off on the second run. Arthur's like trying to fight Lancelot from the ground, and Lancelot's just kind of like poking him from the horse.
Yeah.
But then Lancelot gets down to the sword fight Arthur. He tells Arthur like his rage has unbalanced him, and then they end up like fighting in a creek bed, which this looks really cool. Arthur calls on the power of Excalibur, and this is where he like breaks through Lancelot's pike that he's fighting with, and he's like slashes his armor and is able to like knock him out. But also Excalibur breaks, which here there's like a great sadness by like Arthur and Merlin, where it's like, oh no, like everything is lost now that the sword is broken. And then Arthur throws the sword in the lake and like laments his vanity, like, like this shouldn't have happened, like he should have bested me, and I used power for myself. And so he throws away the Excalibur.
And it's implied that Lancelot's dead.
Yes.
Because his armor is not it's not cut through, but it's deeply impacted.
Yeah, it's bloody too. So
yeah,
but not like majorly bloody. Just just a slash on there. But then the Lady of the Lake has like is like reformed Excalibur and offers it back to Arthur because he's like his lament has proved his worthiness of Excalibur. So Arthur takes Excalibur back, which Merlin's like, hurry. So like, I don't know, like, if it's implied a time limits here, but I don't know.
Well, I think Merlin's just like, take it, you fool. This chance isn't coming.
This might be another thing he's never seen before. So it's like, yeah, hurry, man. Lancelot wakes up and pledges himself to Arthur. Lancelot kisses the sword and becomes Arthur's champion, which then because of that, Lancelot now uses Excalibur like in Arthur's stead.
I believe so. Yeah, he's like the champion.
Yeah. We cut to it's nighttime. There's a burning hill. The knights speak of victory over a foreign enemy. So is this them like fighting back the French or something like that, or what's going on?
I'm not sure. Well, they don't even name Britain in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, so you don't know. Like, this is all very mythological.
Okay.
The nameless enemy has been defeated. It's like, who, why? It's like, no, come on, don't.
Arthur talks about building the Knights of the Round Table, where like there'll be sort of an equality. So yeah, that's always.
Well, this is where, like, we have the scene with Merlin where the knights are all happy and he's getting jostled around, and he has the cool flame staff.
Yeah.
Fire shoots out of his staff, and everyone's like, "Whoa, fire!" And they all form a circle around him.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is where, like, Arthur's like, Merlin, in your wisdom, you will create a round table so that no man may sit at the head of it, above, in front of another. And it's like, oh wait, you're still a king, but this is like Monty Python plays with this a lot better than this does. It's like, this isn't an egalitarian society that's king of, but okay.
I mean, this is kind of the thing. I think this is why the King Arthur story resonates with Americans, because they like to think everyone's equal. So like, how the table represents the idea of it appeals to Americans. How it's actually utilized is completely different. But
yeah, because remember, in America we have no class. Everyone has an equal opportunity to be, but if you don't become one, you're just a peasant. You're going to die. So,
and it was your fault for not working hard enough.
That opportunity is there if you work hard enough. Our problem, Colin, is neither one of us worked hard enough.
Nope.
We should have applied ourselves to tasks.
Should have rise and grind.
Yep.
Here we are doing a podcast.
Yeah. Here I am at the end of my life, talking about movies from the beginning of my life.
We cut to Lancelot shows up to escort Guinevere to the king for like marriage, I guess. Well, yeah, that's what happens. But Guinevere is like sort of distraught by her instant love with Lancelot. So it's like,
by the way, this guy's like insanely handsome in this movie. It's like casting. It's like, find the most handsome, curly-haired, superhero looking guy you can. It's like, here he is.
Strong
like, all right.
jaw, good teeth, no body fat. So.
Yeah, zero body fat. Somehow in an age where men eat pork and sawdust, this guy looks like he works out 8 hours a day. It's the armor suit. It keeps him strong. It weighs so much.
Yeah. On the road, she talks with Guinevere, and Lancelot claims his love for Guinevere, like an almost like a, like it's almost like a. It's like
it's like a fait accompli. It's like, I love you, and I will eternally love you. It's like, we just met. It's like, doesn't matter.
But it's almost like, it's like, but we're not gonna we're not gonna make love. It's just like, you and my best friend are going to love each other, and I'm going to love both of you. And she's like, I think that's going to go wrong. It's like, well, I hope not.
I'm French, so be careful.
Yeah, in France, everyone has a mistress. It's just how it works.
If you don't have a mistress, you're like gay or something.
My mistress will be the queen.
Yeah. I love the king and the queen, but that love is not mutually exclusive. Like, huh? Now we're polyamorous? What?
We had the wedding of Arthur and Guinevere, which is a lot of shininess here too. It's like amongst the forest. It looks pretty.
This is the shiniest time of armor. Remember this.
I think this was actually shot in like a studio, so I think this is actually where you have the dialogue is actually fine. So
yeah, this almost looks like the metal scene from the end of the first Star Wars. Like, that's where this was shot. I don't know.
That's the
So
I think forget what this movie looks like a medieval heavy metal album.
yeah, oh, yeah, the movie was very influential to all the movies that came after it in the 80s. Think Lady Hawk, stuff like
Yeah.
that. It all looks kind of like this. No, it
Uh,
doesn't take itself as seriously, but yeah.
we get Morgana here, played by Helen Mirren. She's Arthur's half brother. She like knows alchemy or whatever they call this, magic, some whatever spells.
She declares herself a sorceress to Merlin.
Yeah.
And of
Which
course he's like, ah.
yeah, he's kind of excited to have an apprentice or something or whatever. Like their relationship is weird. And he talks about how the way of the necromancer is a lonely one. Like the one god comes to drive out the way of the many gods. And so this is where like Merlin lays out like how the rest of the world is going to work out. So then we cut to Lancelot is sort of harassed by a young Percival. He wants to be a knight, and so he gets like a rabbit for him and stuff like that, and then he starts following around and he runs after the horse that that Lancelot's on. It's like you're gonna want to get on this horse, and he's like, it's 20 days away. It's like, and Percival's like, yeah, I can do that. So it just runs after this fucking horse for 20 days. So that's dedication. So
He wants to be Lancelot's squire.
yeah,
So he can be a knight.
which they get to Camelot, which they there's many like what shiny cities on the mountain. Which what does that refer to? That's like biblical, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because I know that's like an American trope, like a very famous Reagan speech.
Okay.
Is like, we are the shining city on the hill that the world looks to.
Yes. Okay.
And it's like, that's optimistic, but okay.
Isn't there always trouble with the shiny city on the hill though? Isn't that
Oh
always,
yeah,
isn't that an omen rather than a great dream?
well, it depends on how you look at it. It's like, yeah, it's always failed, but it's that American optimism. It's like, we're going to be the one people that get it. We're going to be the Rome that works forever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the odds are not in your favor.
They get. I mean, actually, what's really funny about this movie is like a lot of this looks like a higher budgeted version of Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious how you can watch these movies are mutually interchangeable in a lot of ways.
But what, like that was like 77, right, or something like that, I think. So
I think so, yeah.
So they get to Camelot, which strikes Percival at all. He's still just running behind this horse. That's funny. We get Morgana and Guinevere seem to be friends, or they just hang out, whatever. We see a sit down on we see the round table. It's very shiny. They just have knights sit down at first, but don't have like a meeting just yet. We cut to nighttime at the castle. Merlin and Morgana get weird and teasy because Morgana wants power, but it's all like implied about sex stuff with Merlin. He's like, I don't do that. And she's like, yeah, but you said you're gonna give me what you like some of your power or the stuff you withhold. And he's like, whatever. So, which I don't know. Like Merlin's like 300 years old or something. I don't know.
Since the beginning of time, he said he's
okay.
made his way. So. So he's like, I don't know, like what you call that in D&D, like a demigod or something. Yeah. Like not quite a god, but like the right hand of a god, maybe.
Yeah.
That would explain like his ability to be deceived and to still be surprised. It's like he has an imperfect knowledge of both the future and the past. What a god is someone who lives outside of time.
Yeah.
That's the huge difference between mortals and gods is like gods live in the past and the future and the present all at once. And you just travel through that. But it doesn't mean they're happy because they're bound by fate, which is like when we'll talk about O Fortuna later. That's all about that.
We meet Gawain, and this is played by Liam Neeson. He's one of the Knights of the Round. Arthur talks about people without want and wondering if the land has been rid of evil, which he asks Merlin, which he's like, no, there can't be good without evil, so it's always going to be there. So if you created a greater good, then that means there's a greater evil somewhere else.
Yeah, for every god, there is a Satan. And there's a co-equal power arrangement in the universe.
Gawain mentions of like a growing awkwardness of Lancelot not being there, and because of the lust for Guinevere, so that's like the evil that Gawain speaks of, and he basically accuses the queen of infidelity, and now Galway has to fight Lancelot, which Guinevere wants Arthur to fight him, but like he's like, no, the rules of the land would not dictate that. So
Well, yeah, a king can't fight, so she has to name a champion.
yeah,
I think there's some kind of like there's all this stuff. It's like I wanted to look up about what were the rules of like chivalry,
yeah,
because it's like, I love like the laws of Canley and Dune, which were like that was an assassin's war, what you couldn't do, like you couldn't use atomics, you couldn't use armies. But I was like, what does chivalry mean and how does that work? And it's more of a vibe than like a bunch of written rules, which it's like, oh, okay, but yeah, essentially the king is also like the judge, and the judge can't fight,
okay,
and what do they call that, trial by forfeiture?
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the king is the arbitrator and he can't fight, but it's like it involves his wife, so he basically called her a harlot, and and it's like, oh, the reason he's away is because he's trying to control his lust.
Yeah.
It's like, so you're making a false statement. But
We see Lancelot sits outside the castle and asks God to purge him of his love. And then we see Lancelot sleeps naked and fights an armored version of himself. And then the suit is revealed to be empty. But then Lancelot has been stabbed by Excalibur.
Very reminiscent almost of like when Luke has to face Darth Vader in Yoda's cave.
Yeah.
It's like, huh, okay, I see where that came.
I mean, that's probably that's probably from the hero's journey or whatever that story is.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell's stuff. Yeah. Hero with 1,000 faces. Yeah.
We cut to it's fight time. Percival gets knighted by Arthur to fight Gawain, but then Lancelot shows up. We see him bleeding from the wound he got previously. Lancelot and Gawain joust. They knock each other off. Lancelot's still bleeding from yesterday's wounds, but it's just like further keeps on bleeding. They're handed maces, and they start fighting it out. Lancelot gets the other hand, and Gawain yields and declares that the queen is innocent. And then Lancelot passes out from his wounds as he's about to kill Gawain. So you don't know if he stopped killing him for reasons or the wound stopped him. You don't know. So.
I think when the guy declared the queen is innocent, it was a chance to get out of, because Lancelot just then gave up.
Yeah.
Because the wound he received is a metaphoric wound for the wounded land that, because this wound has been inflicted upon me for my lust, and so
he pulled the sword from the flesh. it's a different metaphor.
Who pulls the sword out of Lancelot will be king. So it's dark.
We see Merlin heals Lancelot, but at what cost? Because I was asked to by Arthur. With Merlin and Arthur away, Lancelot wakes before Guinevere. They kind of share a look. We cut to Lancelot hooks up with Guinevere in the forest, and Arthur knows about it, so he's talking to Merlin about it. So, he asks Merlin for guidance, but Merlin says his days are over and the days of men are here, and it's up to Arthur to find a way forward.
Very Gandalf there. Like, I must get on the ship and go to the Grey Havens now. Time of men is upon us. Thanks. Now you're going to bail?
Morgana goes off with Merlin looking for power. We see Arthur stands before Lancelot and Guinevere. It looks like he's going to kill them both. Merlin is stabbed with the sword for a moment as it goes in his chest, but then it just disappears. So it's like a metaphorical thing, because he says the land has been stabbed and a great darkness is upon us or something like that. And then Merlin gets trapped by Morgana in an ice thing. So.
Oh yeah, Morgana learns his charm of making in his weakened state. That's when they say all that weird "Hal now Nathrath Uthvaspetel." They're saying, I forget what, there's a translation for that, but yeah, apparently if you know that charm, you can make any, because that's how he turned Uther into to look like the Duke of Cornwall, and it was that same spell.
Okay.
Apparently, if you use that, you can imprison Merlin or make things, because she uses it later on Arthur.
Lancelot and Guinevere awake with Excalibur shoved in the stone in between them. They lament the loss of everything. She cries around the sword. It's also implied that she takes the sword out of the ground.
Yeah, I think she does.
We just don't.
She becomes a nun after that.
But we,
So yeah,
but like, but like that seems like that would be a big moment. Like if the king puts the sword away, but then the queen is able to get it out. It's like, what's that mean? But no, they
it's
just
her love connects him to him,
yeah.
connects her to him, so he has that power.
Morgana does some magic and sleeps. No, and like Arthur ends up sleeping with his half sister, thinking that it's Guinevere. So it's like, well, this is messed up. So
Yeah, this
so
is very ethical. This is
yeah,
very ethical like, stuff going on
yeah.
here.
So that being the end Act 2. We got Act 3. Morgana's giving birth to her son at the Duke's castle. Arthur gets, yeah, does Arthur get struck by lightning?
Yes,
Okay, because that's what makes him sickly for the rest of the movie. So,
yes, the
um,
land is sick
yeah, because like the
because yeah, he gets struck by Arthur because that's the portents of the birth of Mordred,
yeah.
his bastard son with his half sister, who is played by John Borman's son as a young Mordred.
um, we cut to a knight goes out amongst the people, and they're all distraught and in need, but there's no king, or at least a sickly one, so they can't do it. There's a meeting around the round with a sickly Arthur. He tells the knights to search for the Grail. Only the Grail can redeem us. Which I'm guessing this is Jesus' Holy Grail, right? I mean, they just call it the Grail, but they don't say like the Holy
Yes,
Grail.
this is the cup of Christ.
Okay,
Yeah,
but they don't like necessarily say it like that, right? It's just the Grail, and that's just
yeah,
how
it's the Holy Grail. Yeah, they don't say like this is the cup of Christ. They just it's known as like yeah, this is the Grail.
But they're Christians, but they just don't. They
Yeah,
don't necessarily get specific like that.
no.
You just see the iconography, Christian iconography, and it's just kind of
Well,
like,
yeah, because they're blending like Celtic mythology with
yeah,
like early Christianity,
yes.
like early medieval Christianity.
The knights head off on this journey. There's like a montage. They find the land fraught with death and peril. They find a knight frozen to death. Um, uh, there's a dead knight and a horse, and then we see like a gold knight taunts Percival, and he's shown some more dead knights, and then he's brought before Morgana, and then we learn that the knight in the gold is like Mordred, the evil kid. Um,
And all the armor here, except for Mordred's, is very dull.
yeah.
It's the dull armor phase of Camelot.
um, and I can't remember if it's this evil kid that's played by the banjo kid from Deliverance, or if it's the teenager or whatever version of it. But
Now, I think this is the Robert Addy version
okay,
because there is a really young one, but this one is the same guy because he speaks the same way later. So I think
okay.
this is the same guy.
Percival is captured and hung from the neck to choke to death, and then like a dead knight's boot is like slowly cutting him free. It's also like this is the stuff I remember from this movie because there's like the crow eating the eyeball out of the knight's eye and stuff like that. So there's a lot of imagery that I remember from this movie from being a kid. It's like, oh, that's gross.
Yeah, and Percival's also hallucinating like a cross.
Yeah.
And Arthur at the center of it, and then Jesus on the cross, and then we cut back and forth between that and rotting bodies and the spur of a knight, like
yeah.
slowly through. It's a really amazing like interstitial amount of scenes.
And Percival dreams of the Grail, but he runs away from the Grail for whatever reasons. I can't remember.
He's not worthy of the Grail. He's failed as king.
And so as he runs away from the Grail in the dream, he's like accidentally cut free, from just circumstance by the spur of the knight boot. Percival thinks he's failed, and Arthur in his dream. We cut to Morgana ages Mordred into a young man, and Morgana sends him to Arthur. Mordred comes to claim the kingdom, and Arthur says, "I cannot give you the land, only my love." And he's like, "That's the only thing I don't want." And so Mordred vows to come back and take Camelot by force. Percival gets the Grail, and Arthur drinks from it, and now he gets his energy back. So now we get like the O Fortuna plays as they kind of ride into or they don't start the battle, but it's like a ride to the start of the battle. So, which I
Yes,
like.
this poem is called O Fortuna.
Okay.
And it's part of a medieval Latin poem from the 13th century. It's part of a larger collection known as I'm going to butcher this, the Carmina Burana.
Okay.
And a German composer named Karl Orff in the 30s took this writing, this a medieval Latin, and made it into the cool song that you hear. The don don don. I can't play it
Yeah.
because of course we'd get like copyright striked for something from the 13th
Yeah,
century.
something that should be
Okay,
in the public domain.
yeah, so it's like actually 700 years old at this point. Let me read the lyrics because I think I can do that. I'm not going to read them in medieval Latin. But this is what is sung in medieval Latin in that song. O fortune, like the moon, you are changeable, ever waxing, ever waning. Hateful life first oppresses, then soothes. Playing with mental clarity, poverty, and power, it melts them like ice. Fate, monstrous and empty, you whirling wheel, you are malevolent, devoid of security and ever fading into nothing, shadowed and veiled. You plague me too. Now through the game, I bring my bear back to your villainy. Fate in health and virtue is against me. Driven on and weighted down, always enslaved. So at this hour without delay, pluck the vibrating strings, since fate strikes down the strong. Everyone weep with me. And that is in Latin, that's what they're singing in that song.
Huh.
And that song is, and that poem, that original poem, is considered like it's like man's man and like how would you say it, like men and heroes and demigods are all bound and destroyed by fate. Just meant of the destruction of fate and the emptiness and the sadness it brings us all as death takes us all, essentially.
Huh.
Man and God alike all die, in that tradition. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. The soundtrack of this movie.
Kind of reminds me of the Widening Gyre, but just like hundreds of years before that came
Yes,
out.
hundreds of years, 12th century. So yeah, that's actually amazingly cool if you look into it. It's I've often wanted to have that poem like on some kind of aged tapestry so it looks like it's from that time and put it in a frame on my wall. But I just never got around to it because I have so many other weird things. But yeah, so that's the history of that, folks.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's like it fits perfectly, like a perfectly made puzzle piece. It just clicks into place. Like, because you got to do some research, you got to read it. And of course, read medieval Latin. I'm not bullshitting anyone here, but the English lyrics are like, oh wow, that is actually perfect for this movie, and for selling Tide laundry soap or whatever they were using it for later. But in this case, it's really good. I think it's used ironically in advertising.
Yeah.
As if a great thing is happening, but it's somebody like washing the dishes. So it's like a comical counterpoint. But this is the coolest application of it I've ever seen. Remember,
like somebody drops ravioli on their favorite shirt, and then it gets washed, and so by the end of it, it's a triumphant return of the shirt. When the reality of the song and the poem have like, so you're talking. Well, you got your shirt back, but by the poem's thing is like it should be destroyed because you can never have anything. It's bound by fate to die.
You will drop ravioli on this again. As a cycle, the wheel will grind us down. This was also an inspiration for, it's the coolest thing that came out of the Star Wars prequels was the song Duel of the Fates.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
This was heavily inspired by this.
That's a really cool
Only
song.
they were singing in, what were they singing in? Like Sanskrit or something. They're basically saying terrible battle over and over again.
Okay.
But the kind of the cadence, the tone, and everything, it all traces back to O Fortuna. So or Fortuna. So that's the guys who invented that clearly said,
do you put a ch in there at the T? Oh, Fortuna.
It's like a T
because it's close to fortune, so like that makes sense.
It's medieval Latin, which is like, and like I said, I'm not an expert because I know medieval Latin is like kind of like people that spoke French and English, like that was them speaking Latin versus like the Latin the Romans spoke. So it was more of like a religious language at that time. But yeah, but the people who came up with that said we didn't want to do the obvious thing and play Fortuna while the Jedi were fighting.
Yeah.
So we came up with our own thing that was very similar to it and kind of reflected the same thing, but we were singing in an even weirder, older language because it was cool. So yeah. Only good thing that came out of the sequels was the Duel of the Fates song.
I mean, I don't know. There's moments.
Yeah, there's moments. That's one.
If you spend $200 million on a movie, you gotta create at least the one moment. So.
Oh yeah, when those two Jedi are fighting, like the guy with the, basically the quarterstaff lightsabers, like that's really cool as hell. That was amazing. It's just everything that happened before that was like, well, okay, I paid a high price to get this far, but all right.
Yeah. Arthur meets with Guinevere, who's now like a nun for the church. So now she's given her vow of celibacy. So.
Yeah.
I guess as penance for betraying Arthur.
Percival is also there's a couple reasons. This is spelled out. Again, this comes from Joseph Campbell, but Percival was a virgin.
Okay.
The only reason he could get the cup of Christ is because he had never lied with a woman.
Okay.
And it was always because he never thought he was ready. He never felt the right one. But it's like, oh no, this is the reason why. Because I'm not guided by lust. I'm just guided by purity.
Okay.
So that's something to take note of, like the roles that sex and penance and play in this universe. It's like, yeah, they don't exactly say that in the movie, but it is part of it.
And I can't remember, but I feel like, is Lancelot gone from the movie now, or do we know what happened to him?
No, he comes back.
Okay.
I think.
I'll tell you when I need to let you handle the rest of the movie because so it's coming up soon. So she gives Excalibur back to Arthur. She has it like under her bed, wrapped up. Arthur says he has a dream of Guinevere coming to claim him as her husband, and so he says, "But it is a dream." So it's like, all right, well, he's doomed. So
yeah. It's a nice thought, but it's not gonna. We're not coming home from battle with our shields. We're probably coming home on them at this point. So
the Knights of the Round ride on. They see smoke in the distance of Mordred's army. Arthur meditates at a Stonehenge, so it's kind of like his dad, but here he sees Merlin, who either is or is not released from his bonds. So you're not sure.
Arthur's kindness and kind words release him from the evil spell.
Okay.
Because it's Arthur's love, because he says it's like your love of me has freed me for one last time, or something like that. There's some dialogue like that, yeah.
And so Nathan, you'll now have to guide us to the rest of the movie.
So we know that Arthur his love of Merlin has liberated him, and they talk one last time, and then Merlin just exits stage left, and he comes upon Morgana in her chambers. Now she still looks exactly the same, even though she's got a kid in his 20s now.
Yeah.
And she still looks exactly the same. So as in her sleeping state, Merlin tricks her, and she speaks that weird, like, oh no, not throughout, all that stuff. And then smoke starts coming out of her mouth, and that smoke engulfs the battlefield. So Arthur's much smaller force can engage Morgana's much larger force and have the advantage.
Okay.
But like, cause he's out there on the parapets with his men, and he's like, strange fog engulfs the battlefield, sire. What does it mean? I don't know. I'll ask mother. And then he goes in there and sees, like, oh, the charm of making has aged her to her proper age, and she looks like an old woman. So he basically like thrusts a sword through her chest, and it's like, my mother, it's because this old woman disgusts him, because she's like, come to me, my son. And of course he's like, because he's a psycho, that's what psychos do. They murder their mothers and stuff. And he's basically disgusted by her. And so then he heads out, and he's like, the battlefield is bewitched or something. We'll still prevail. And then so Arthur and Mordred's forces engage. Lancelot shows up. I think he has a beard, or he looks aged.
Okay.
He shows up at the end of the battle, and him and Arthur reconcile. And he says, I want to die a true knight. And they have, there's all kinds of crazy fights, but essentially Lancelot is mortally wounded and dies. almost everyone else is dead except Arthur and Mordred. And they have a cool line in here because Mordred like has like a because Mordred's fighting more like a Greek guy with a long spear, and of course Arthur has Excalibur. And so Mordred comes up to Arthur and he's like, "Let us embrace, father, one last time." And he hails Arthur. And Arthur just grabs the spear and starts pulling it through him until Mordred is right next to him and he sticks the sword in Mordred's neck. And then he kills Mordred. And then Percival shows up again. And he's, like, "How can I help my king?" Because he's mortally wounded. He's got a spear sticking out of him. And he says, "Take Excalibur and throw it into the water." And he's like, "Don't," and Percival's like, "I'm not worthy." And he's like, "No, throw it in the water and a king will come." We're still waiting for that to this day. So yeah.
Is that supposed to be the second coming of Jesus?
We don't know. And the Lady of the Lake.
Jesus rides in on a horse of fire and with Excalibur in hand.
No, is Donald Trump going to be given the sword? We don't know. Probably not. But anyway, anyway, Percival looks at Excalibur and you can tell he has a moment of doubt. It's like he doesn't want to get rid of this beautiful thing that, briefly brought the land together, but he throws it into the water and it's just like throws it overhanded. And then this hand sticks up and the sword lands perfectly in it. And it kind of goes into the water like that. And then, of course, we play the, Cedric's funeral. The Wagner opera comes up again, and we see like King Arthur's body is on like a boat, and it's going out to sea, like that burial at sea where they set the boat on fire and just push it out. We see Arthur like laying there, and then credits because Arthur is going to they didn't call it Valhalla. What'd they call it at that time? It was the Celtic thing.
Oh.
Shit.
Celtic afterlife. The other world? Nah. Yep. The other world is the realm of the deities and possible also the dead.
Okay, I think Avalon. It's Avalon.
Okay.
That's the afterlife. That's the glorious afterlife.
Okay.
So that is
Avalon is a mythical island featured in the Arthurian legend.
Yes. For some reason, I was thinking Patagonia. It's like that's not it. That's a real place.
Yeah.
It's Avalon, which is basically Valhalla for Celts.
Okay.
And I could be getting that wrong too, so don't write into the show. I don't have some advanced degree in like weird European Middle Age philosophy,
this movie feels like it's like the entire Star Wars trilogy in one movie. So
yeah, oh yeah,
the original trilogy. Because even like, only 2 would have been out by then, but like Merlin coming back feels like Return of the Jedi with Ben Kenobi coming back as a ghost, as a Force ghost or whatever, and talking with one last time.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure all this is based on that and shares DNA with that. 'Cause it's a very famous. The Knights of the Round Table is a famous story.
Yeah.
The more like historically accurate versions of what it might be are probably closer to like the one with who was the guy?
Clive
Owen one about the fall of Rome and the civilizing of Britain. But yeah, this was fun to watch.
There was a kind of a neat cartoon show in the 90s. I think it was just called Knights of the Round.
Okay.
And it was like a descendant of King Arthur is like, it's like the 90s. And so a descendant of King Arthur is like a pro football quarterback.
Okay.
And then they get sucked into a time tunnel to like a kind of like ancient time or medieval times. And then they become the new Knights of the Round, but it's almost like more like steampunk Knights of the Round.
Oh, okay. Tech Knights.
Yeah. I remember
Okay.
it being cool, but it's been a long. It probably only had like one season or something like that. But it was a neat take on the King Arthur legend. So, um, well, we're sending a probe into space containing a supercut of the scenes for the imperfect collection that are the movies of the Verhoeven Effect. Nathan, what one scene in this movie are we shoving into space?
Well, probably because of the just to express the feelings of loss and rebirth in this movie is probably the combat scene with Arthur and Lancelot,
Okay.
because that really does capture the fate and redemption arc of this story over
Yeah.
that plays out over and over and over
Yeah.
again. So yeah, I would say that would be the most effective scene.
Okay.
To get like, yeah, if you want to get the gist of this movie, that's what it is. It's like anger, lust, rage, and then sadness. Like also like very typical of medieval Christianity. Commit the sin, forgiveness for the sin, commit the sin again. This seems to be a pattern here.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
Um, well, you can find us at Letterbox username VHE. What Nathan? 1 out of 5 stars. And I know this movie is close to you. What are we giving
Oh,
this movie?
this is a solid 5
Okay.
because I hadn't watched this movie in like 20 years.
Okay.
And I rewatched it for this, and it brought me right back. But
Okay. That's
it
nice.
also was a lot of a lot of fond feelings towards this movie and what they were trying to do, and the fact they did this in like 1981,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy.
So
That was time of dreamy movies though, because one of my other favorites, Time Bandits,
yeah.
was like right after this.
So do you think you have the same feelings now? Is it pure nostalgia, or do you have a new appreciation for it now?
Well, I do have an appreciation for what they were trying to do with a complicated subject
Yeah.
and how they did their own thing with it. Because this isn't like, oh, we're hitting the high points of everything about the Arthurian legends. No, they picked the stuff they wanted and really vectored in on that. Not only because it was practical to do that, but this was also the director's vision of what he wanted. I can say you could see this in Zardoz, and especially in this movie. It's like, yeah, this is really John Borman. Like, I want to tell this story my way, and it comes through, and it actually holds up pretty well. It's still a cool looking movie. I mean, it's a movie from 40 years ago or whatever.
Yeah,
but
let's take a look. Let's see what other movies that came out in 1981 and compare them.
yeah, the 80 to 88 is like a nightmare time to have a standout movie because there's so many good movies from that time.
Well, there's also, wildly different quality movies.
Yeah.
All right. Escape from New York, definitely a wildly different looking movie. That's a cool looking movie, but I don't think his looks kind of hold up, but it is like definitely a cheaper movie. The Road Warrior came out, definitely a different looking kind of movie. My Bloody Valentine, I don't know what that looks like, but it is Valentine's Day, so bring it up, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's have to full window this thing. Thief, that's a very different looking movie.
Yes.
The original The Evil Dead.
Okay.
Halloween 2.
That was in 1980. What was that?
Hmm?
When was Evil Dead?
Evil Dead, yeah, 1981.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought that was in the mid 80s.
I mean, Evil Dead 2 was in the mid 80s. That's kind of its biggest. I mean, like the Evil Dead series is kind of known for its horror and its comedy, and if you watch the original one, it's basically just a horror movie. There's almost no comedy in it. So,
That's true.
An American Werewolf in London, which I've never seen, but I always hear good things about. Like, it's a crazy movie.
It's a good movie, yeah.
Oh, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Time Bandits. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of good movies coming out here.
Yeah, the top 10 best movies, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, On Golden Pond, Superman 2, Arthur, Stripes, The Cannonball Run, Chariots of Fire, For Your Eyes Only, The Four Seasons, and...
Oh, Heavy Metal came out this year?
Yes, it did. It is literally one of the most crowded years. I mean, all those years between...
Knight Riders came out. I've heard... We probably need to watch that. Do you know what that movie is, Nathan?
Night Riders.
So
no.
it's a George Romero movie, or not George? Yeah, the Night of the Living Dead guy, right? George Romero.
Yes.
and it stars oh, what's his name? Ed from. Yeah, we just saw him in Love Lies Bleeding.
Oh. Hmm.
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris. Okay.
And it's like they have like it's like almost like a medieval night theme kind of like show they put on for people. It's like in the modern times of that era, but instead of
Okay.
horses, they have motorcycles. And there's and there's also it's also I heard it's very weird and George Romero doing his thing where it's like it's very understated, but if you look into it, it's actually kind of genius. So it was easily dismissed, but it seems like a really interesting movie. So I've never seen it. I've only heard about it, so we'll have to watch that sometime.
Yeah, I've never heard of this before, but I'll tell you what, the movie poster with a guy with a flail, like a morning star, on a bike with a shield for the wind guard, that looks pretty cool.
um. So yeah, I guess in a crowded year, this movie did stand out at least in its looks. I'm not sure how well it did that year, but
Top 20 grossing film in the United
okay,
States. Yeah.
not bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like John Borman was offered to do a lot of big movies, so it's, um. Well, you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. There we have listener support. You can support us on a monthly stipend on 99 cents, 4.99 or 9.99. Cancel any time. You can rate our podcast whatever you want on the platform of your choice. Remember, only the algorithm only listens to the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm, people. It's getting away from us. You got
Yeah, please control it.
give us the highest rating, and we'll give you your freedom.
Yeah, I mean, just like freedom to think.
You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Blue Sky Social at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Facebook at Verhoeven Effect. And you can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory and watch both this and that show live and unedited. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.